Roll call's complete. We have achieved quorum. These are all good things. So that takes us to the third portion of the agenda. It's the adoption of the agenda. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Thank you.
I second it.
Excellent. All those in favor, if you could just thumbs up on the screens and
Aye.
we're good. Great. Thanks, Brad. Jay, you in favor?
I am.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. Great. Passes unanimously. Takes us to item 4 on the agenda, the approval of the consent agenda. As always, we entertain a motion here in a second, but then we open the floor for presentations, at which time, when they are complete, we will circle back and we will vote on approving or and moving forward. So again, can we entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve.
Thank you, Judith.
Second.
Thanks, Brad. At this point in time, the floor is open for bars, financial reports, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thanks. The finance meeting did happen last week. We did have Karen and Judith get to hear from Mike a detailed report on each of the bars, as well as the December financials. And so now I think we'll do the quick version of the 5 bars in front of us. So those at home should have the attachments on the websites, but I've given a hard copy to everyone here. So Mike, do you want to give us the quick and dirty version of the 5 bars in front of us?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
All right, so 4 of your 5 bars are actually related to your audited financial statements. Those were released over the winter break, I believe, as we have discussed before. With that, we're able to true up cash in the funds that do carry cash from one year to the next. The simple explanation is that when we have our budget process, which we'll be going through very soon here, we have to project what cash we're going to end at June 30th. But we also have a couple of months of lag about when we close the actual school year out. And so that projection is not necessarily exact. And so when we have our audit, we are able to get to a more exact figure as far as our cash. And what the system does on the PED side is kicks out these bars that recognize any difference between our projection and that audited cash. So starting with bar 0007-I, this is that cash projection for your operational fund. And we had a conservative projection. And so the actual projection came in at $59,799 more than we anticipated at fiscal year end. So we're able to add that back into the budget. And as you can see, we're hitting a number of lines throughout your support services, essential services, and some for operation and maintenance of plant. Just some areas where we're seeing some slight overages and some areas of potential expenditures. The one that in specific that we might not actually expend, you look at the very bottom line for other contract services out of that function 2600, that 26,000 can be sort of a placeholder. If we don't necessarily use that because we have capital funds that generally take care of most of your maintenance of your facility and grounds, that 26,000 will just go towards your carryover into the following year. But we do have to budget 100% of those carryover funds. So we have a zero-based budget when it comes to these increases. So that's why you'll see sort of a plug there, just to recognize that we do have a balanced bar. Bar 0008-D. So this one actually represents a decrease. And this is going to be for your activity funds. But again, related to the audit, we projected $2,455 too much. So at close of June 30, we probably had just an expenditure come out that we had to cut a check for, brought down cash just slightly. Keep in mind the present budget is at $80,000. So reducing by a couple thousand isn't a large amount. And we do have areas within the activity funds, the individual activity funds to be able to reduce out. But it shouldn't affect any current year activities. We're keeping a close eye on each individual activity from athletics to the group clubs and things of that nature. Bar 0009-I, another increase. So this is going to be for HB 33. This was a large increase for your capital funds that are based on property tax collections. As we all know, property tax goes up as property values have gone through the roof. And so some sort of recent times, this increase in particular was $186,546. And it's just going to go towards the area for maintenance and repair of buildings and grounds. The school does have, quite a bit of grounds to cover, a lot of facilities that some areas are aging. And so we do have a number of work orders out there. And so this can help to cover those. I don't think we're going to use that entire amount. So a large bulk of this can be carried over and actually utilized for the new facility. So as you look towards expansion and breaking ground and having new sorts of costs, having a good chunk of money within your HB 33 and other capital funds is going to be useful as we look for that middle school expansion. So again, not something that we necessarily are going to use this year. And the good thing about the capital funds is that they never revert. And so once they're in your cash and your bank accounts, the PD can never pull them back. Then bar 0010-D. So it's another form of property tax collection. This is through Senate Bill 9, but this is actually a decrease. And so we actually have a 46,509 that we're reducing from the cash. And it's going to go against that same sort of maintenance or repair of the buildings and grounds. As you can see, it does bring the $100,000 projection down to 53,491, but we're well still within the realm of our budget for those capital funds. And when you look at the two and consider them as a capital project based funds together, the net is going to be about 140,000 between the two that we're actually increasing overall. So we're not in a bad position, and again we're remaining within budget across both funds. And then the final bar, this is not related to audit, and it actually skips over bar 0011. So bar 11 was actually another audit-based bar, but it was for 45 cents. So I wasn't going to bring that. So we just voided that out. I don't think we're going to find any ability to spend 45 cents. So we moved on to bar 12. So it's bar 0012-IB. IB standing for initial budget. And this is actually the charter school grant that goes through Public Charter Schools of New Mexico. It's a $1.5 million grant. The governing council here has already approved this budget application and the budget, the grant application itself as a whole. And so this is a sort of a back end type of thing and is a PED requirement. So this matches the budget and the application that was submitted and accepted by Public Charter Schools of New Mexico for the 1.5 million, and essentially just gets us budget authority. So this is more of a matter of having to go through the hoops of the PED, but we actually already have access to this funding. We'll be starting to submit for reimbursements the first week of February, and then the first week of every month after that. The first, this first few months of the planning year, it's not going to have a lot of activity, but as things gear up towards that expansion, and as you have some major costs, this 1.5 million is going to be utilized for a number of things, inclusive of a lead teacher, principal, instructional materials, software, all the things that you agreed to as far as the application. So again, you already seen the application in full, you've seen the budget. This is just a matter of getting through the PED's budget process. But as you can see, large budget, a lot of areas that we'll be expending or hoping to expend that 1.5 million. And it's going to be our goal to spend every single penny of that as the school works towards that middle school expansion. And those are the 5 bars that we have for the evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Nicely done.
Any questions for Mike? Or Karen?
December financials report.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good.
We also talked about December financials. Do you want to do a quick overview of that, Mike?
Good thing. So we did go through the financial statements. They are reconciled down to the penny through the month of December 31st, 2024. So that brings us halfway through the fiscal year. Similarly, about halfway through the school year. On the revenue side, the only things we really noted was that Idea B is starting to flow through from APS. And then I did meet with Trey, I believe, on the 16th, a couple of weeks ago, going fund by fund as far as how we start to capture some of these revenues, namely areas like Title II, the kitchen infrastructure grant, and some of the special capital outlays, so those direct legislative appropriations for special projects. And we have a plan for all of those to start spending them down and get some reimbursements flowing. And so as we go through the next few months, we want to see the actual column in that revenue report start to fill up with some numbers. That way we can see that cash is coming through very well. The only thing on the expenditure report we looked at, if you actually look from month to month, from November to December, the operational fund looked like it dropped a little over $100,000 as far as our projection for available budget going into fiscal year 25-26. We actually identified this as an error in an entry on additional compensation for tutoring. Essentially, we over projected how many hours would be in there for tutoring. So the encumbrance for the tutors was probably about 7 times too high. And so we have corrected that, but that did happen in January. So the January reports are going to reflect that number coming back down, and we'll be closer to the $400,000 range as far as cash carryover and operational, which I think we determined came to about 5% but cash carryover based on your SCG. And so that's kind of our target, between 3 and 5% cash carryover from year to year as far as operational. Another big area was food service. So we do know that the school has a really good food service program and good food. It does come at a cost. And so we're going to have to look at probably the next month or so an analysis of the food service program and to see its sustainability and how comfortable we are potentially supplementing it with operational funds, because at this time, between what the USDA reimburses and what the state reimburses, as far as what's called universal free meals, it's not looking like it's going to cover the entire cost of your food service contractor, their labor, and the food itself. And Trey, I don't know if you want to touch on that. I know we had a little bit of a conversation on it.
Yeah, I presented a spreadsheet I'm keeping internally that shows the shortfall between what our bill from the contractor is and month to month how much we're getting reimbursed from the states and the feds. And the shortfall is getting better as the year progresses, but it's still a shortfall. And so it's something to keep in mind. We're going to be okay because we have this big grant that's helping float us for a while. We have a good cash carry forward. But the sustainability of that program is really something we need to continue to advocate at like a legislative level. Like, don't just say you're going to require schools to do this and not truly have funding that accompanies it. They did come up with a lot of funding. Like we're reimbursed for the cost of the food itself. What you're not reimbursed for is labor and everything that comes along with the program. And that's frustrating. So at a statewide political level, you get to claim a win. We're giving free meals, but it's also hurting school budgets. So it's something we're going to continue to look at legislatively in terms of advocacy. But good program we're doing. It's exciting to have it.
Thank you, Trey. And the rest of the expenditures, really fund by fund, haven't adjusted too much. This time of the year, we shouldn't see too much adjustment unless, a title or a grant fund, has a sort of change in what the initial application intended, but we're not seeing that for this time of the year at this time. So not much more to report on that. As far as your cash flow on the check register, we did note that there was about $645,000 of deposits with about $657,000 of withdrawals. So that cash flow is about even. So bringing about the same amount of money in as you're expending. That's what we want to see about this time of year. So we're not having any issues with cutting checks or getting vendors paid and making payroll and payroll taxes. And then the last sort of thing we went over was your bank reconciliation. So this does balance to the general ledger at 1.73 million, and that's down to the penny. And we always kind of look at where does that cash lie, and a bulk of it is within your operational fund at 980,000 of that. And so we're doing good as far as that goes. Just to keep in mind also, one of our findings was having a late cash report. And I did provide Trey earlier this month with proof that the submission was completed, and it does tie out to the general ledger. So that's all at PED. Just waiting on their review to see if they have any questions. But that was the report. I think we're in a good spot moving forward, and I'm excited to get going on the CSP grant, and then also just thinking about getting to the budget process. So we'll have the spring budget conference coming up towards the middle of April, and get our figures for next year, all the new rules, all the new legislation, and we'll try to fight the good fight and make sure we make ends meet once again.
I have a question, Mike. Under the function 3100 food services operation, that's under fund 21000 and under fund 28221. What's the difference in those two? Like, what's the actual difference in what those two are under for 3100?
Right. So fund 21,000 is actually their federal reimbursement. So that's what we submit claims to the USDA based on students that actually participate in the food service program, and we get reimbursement through there. The reason that you see no budget in fund 21,000 is because there was no program last year, and so we have to establish budget. So at the next meeting, I'll bring forth some bars for both food services not only the Fund 21,000, but Fund 21,100. Now, the Fund 28,211, this is a special grant that's actually coming direct from the state, not necessarily through the PED, and actually is getting funded directly from the Department of Finance and Administration. And it's a public school kitchen infrastructure. So it's supposed to be mainly for starting up a new kitchen program. So you're getting all your big equipment. We have a big project looking for an outside eating area, getting the Sunflower Cafe outfitted to actually be able to provide food service, and just getting all that stuff up and running and doing it in a really quick manner, because you got the grant, and then you were told, let's get food service, and you had, a month and a half before students were in the seats. So that's what that big grant was, and I think it was a bit of a surprise. $500,000 is quite a bit of money, but we're happy to have it, and we actually have some really good plans to spend a bulk of it. On the logistical side, we have to submit quotes to the DFA for them to approve, and those quotes are amounting to, I think, about 470,000 at this point of that 506. So we have those plans in, and we just are kind of waiting for the state to give us the okay to move forward on some of the bigger items. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I see it as food services operations versus a capital outlay kind of grant, right?
Yes.
Okay. No. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was good.
Yeah, anything else? Are we good? Now I can say, any other questions for Mike? Yeah. Great. Hearing none, Mike, thanks as always for a detailed report and answering our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
I think, so then it's, we're moving.
Well, you had the motion in a second.
Yeah, with motion in a second, and everyone's good, all questions answered, and we feel comfortable. Great. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor for approving the consent agenda, just raise your hand if you're in the room.
Aye.
Throw me a thumbs up if you're virtual. Great. That passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it greatly. Let's see. So if you're following your agenda, that takes us to the fifth item. That's public forum and public input. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak at this time? Okay. Hearing none, we will move forward to the report section of our agenda.
Our student.
Yeah, I noticed. I was going to ask that. I didn't notice it, so I thought, well, I think I'm missing anything. So for those of you looking at your agenda, our student representative will not be here this evening. So that will move us straight into our executive director, unless you would like to flip-flop those straight for any reason.
No, I think I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm going to go, and then Margie and Jen are going to help me co-present it here as well, and then we'll let Laurel go after.
Good plan.
So for those here, the last page is kind of a print off of some of the reports that I have prepared for some talking points. Yep. And then those at home have a copy of the PDF version. So I'm first going to talk about things not related. So Margie and Jen are here to talk about math and math instruction and math outcomes and what we're doing math related this year. So before we get to that, I thought I'd give some other updates related to expansion and other just general things going on with the school. First, we just got word on Friday that EMHS is one of 10 national semifinalists for a model charter award. They identified 10 high-performing charters from around the country, and we were identified as one of the 10. And they're going to announce semifinalists in March, and then there's an award ceremony in Miami in May. This is a group called Building Hope. So you can add the link there, but it's the Building Hope Impact Award. There was an application process, a nomination process, but pretty cool to have East Mountain listed along 9 other schools from around the nation as a model charter school. It's kind of really the only award like this. It's like an award program for charters around the nation. So,
Bryce, do you know how many charter schools there are in the country? Do you have any idea? A lot. I didn't know if that was.
There's 100 in New Mexico, and there are now 40 states that have charters.
Yeah, I know. Okay, just wondered.
Yeah, I had some great
It's a number
questions,
somewhere
actually. Yeah.
I'll Google.
That'd be great. I'll keep you posted on that award, but that's pretty cool. And I'll be doing a press release and getting some word out about that. We just found out about it. So pretty neat.
So possibly all your teachers get to fly to the warm Miami?
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but that's the next question I had. Is it the warm Miami or cold Miami?
Like Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, really. Google says in 2021, there are approximately 7,800. So now I'm sure there are more.
Yeah. Thanks.
In terms of expansion stuff, one big thing that's happening like today, final designs from the architect were submitted to the contractor. And the whole part of that exercise, I think, is to provide an updated cost estimate. You'll remember that SMPC, our architects, have been working on this pretty hefty $850 square foot amount for construction. And now that Franken has been identified, SMPC gives them the most recent schematic design, and Franken is now going to do an exercise of running their own cost analysis. So hopefully getting that soon in the next couple of weeks, but that's a big step to hopefully save some costs related to how expensive that is, but we shall see. Similarly, I think we need to be gearing up for thinking about a late February, early March joint foundation governing council retreat, because pretty soon here we'll get some quotes of a loan amount, a term sheet, and all of that. And so when we're talking about like the governing council schools monthly payment going from $32,000 a month currently to $100,000 a month, we gotta really want to make sure we understand the financial analysis that's gone in behind it. The foundation's done the bulk of the work there and getting a lot of analysis. So we'll just want to gear us up that we should be thinking about. I'll let you know. I'll probably do a doodle to find good dates, but I think that's going to be an important enough conversation that we'll want the entire GC and entire foundation together, like when we finalize the new loan. That's coming up sooner than later. More short term, we had our first EMHS night, like our open house night. This was last Thursday night. This is kind of what we do to get the word out to new families who want to join into ninth grade. So it had a really good turnout. All the rooms we had were packed for that. And a lot of excitement, not just about getting their ninth graders in, but a ton of excitement about, they all had younger siblings. And the fact that there's going to be middle school in 2 years was also extremely exciting to a lot of these folks. So there was a good energy from the Meet EMHS night last week. We also took advantage of that and did some surveys of incoming families. One thing I'm trying to figure out more of is, we know we're going to want a bus service when the middle school opens, but I am really prioritizing seeing if we could get something going by next year, even like to have a trial year of transportation prior to the middle school when it's a bigger system. And so we did a survey to basically see if we had a couple pickups, would any of these incoming, like they're 8th grade now, would they be interested? And there was a lot of support for it. And so thinking something of like we started kicking around in a leadership meeting today, the idea of maybe we'd have a bus pickup to Harris, maybe a Fort Hills to Harris Library, Triangle Grocery, like one bus kind of doing a quick pickup on the way here. Next year, because I think we'd get decent ridership. So we're in a fact-finding mode to figure out, we've never had to do the power school reporting that goes along with transportation. So we're working on that. We're talking to some other schools that do that. And I'm going to figure out the funding piece as well of what that would look like. So just wanted to note that was something we're wrestling with for even next year as well. Okay, that's all kind of, any questions on expansion or just random other lottery stuff before I move into math? I do note here that the lottery opens this Friday. So at the end of this week, the lottery form will go live. We'll be blasting that for a couple of weeks for the lottery to stay open. Usually we get a good gauge within the first week if numbers are looking low, medium, or high. And then we kind of gauge how much recruitment we need to do or advertising versus just let it ride.
I do have a question, Glenn. I would like to ask that when we hear from Trey on the early lineup for the lottery, that we can see comparisons with previous years, so we know if we're stable or moving up or down.
Yep, I can provide that. Probably a good timing is once we actually do the lottery, we keep an historical spreadsheet on file of this is how many students we let in the lottery. This is how many were on the waiting list. By August, this is how many people moved off the waiting list and that sort of thing. And I've had to pull all of that for all of the financial analysis we've been doing recently. So we have that easily accessible. One big shift is like we've been trying to just make the campus more accessible to more people because the demand is there, which has led to a couple of years of larger freshman classes of 120. But right now we're planning on a freshman class of 105 in the lottery. And that'll take us to a full campus of 435, which is still the biggest we've ever been. But we're at, a little under 420 right now. But we're thinking a slightly smaller freshman class year just because we're running out of space and we gotta be smart about it. But what we've also done, if we have 105 spots and maybe only 120 families apply, we end up allowing everyone in and not doing a lottery because what happens is so many families put their names on multiple waiting lists and there's some natural attrition and shopping around that goes on. We'll probably set a number of like where we think we actually need a lottery and where we don't. So yeah, but I mean, the past, post-COVID, always a lengthy waiting list every year. And we expect another waiting list. It's just a matter of how big of a waiting list.
Very good. Yeah, so yeah, that sounds like Trey's got his thumb on that, Brad. But yeah, we'll follow up once we start, numbers start coming in.
Yep.
And I'm sure Trey will provide us this. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Cool. We'll move into some math discussion now. So several meetings we talk about, we're trying to be goal driven and achievement driven and outcome driven and understanding where the school sits in our various academic areas. We've spent a couple meetings talking about how we've responded to the data that we get from like PSAT, for example, and what that means for instruction and that sort of thing. I've noted in the past, very generally, how math is something that's been a particular interest for, but also this year and last year, how we've been excited to embrace some new learning strategies that are really starting to pay off in math. And so there was a kind of not a request from the last meeting to really go into a little more in detail related to what is math looking like on campus now, what is our professional development, our instructional strategies. And so we are lucky enough to be joined by Margie and Jen, who are going to help me present a little more in detail on that. As a reminder, just on the report there, these are all the numbers you've seen, so there's nothing really new there. We, as the refresher, this, the one-stop shop assessment of the entire proficiency of the school is that one performance of the junior cohort in the spring, that one test. It's not a great measure of the school's performance because it's that one-time snapshot, but in the eyes of the state and how it gets communicated to the public, it's something we have to kind of acknowledge and double down on and wrestle with. And so having that last spring number of 23% last year's juniors, seems low and is concerning, but already a lot of improvements and things to be excited about. For example, we already took the PSAT this fall, and that the juniors currently, this year's juniors in the fall, that number was already up by 16%. And so we're already going to see growth of that amount. We all know internally that's not a great comparison to make because you're comparing very different cohorts. But again, in the eyes of the state and the nation that's looking at proficiency data, it's something we have to be kind of familiar with. So we're already seeing good results there. And in addition, we've long known, and we've talked about this, I think even at a GC level, that math instruction is something that has tended to struggle to be updated in terms of what students currently respond best to in terms of learning styles and strategies. And we've been really excited that we've done pretty much a complete makeover of the math department under this model of building thinking classrooms, really brought to us by Jennifer Webb, who's the outstanding national board level 3's math teacher who we love having on our campus. And we're going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to turn it over to Margie next to kind of share her analysis on some of the things we've done this year, what's some of the notice things she's had in relation to the additional assessments we've given, like the STAR math assessment. And then we're going to let Jen talk a little more in detail about what the math department specifically has been up to in terms of collaborating and what this instructional model looks like. I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Margie.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to let Jen talk about a lot of that stuff because she has the firsthand experience and knowledge. But I wanted to follow up. The last time I was here, we talked a little bit about the STAR exam, and Jen and I have been talking about it as well. I mentioned it's not panning out as perfectly as we had hoped, as most things don't. I think specifically like the usability of the data for teachers and manipulating that data to be functional has been a little disappointing, I think, to say, in terms of the way the platform gives us that information. So that's something we're looking into. Jen and I have also talked about the benefit of using the STAR for math placement, given the way that our courses are. And I think we're leaning on continuing to use a Delta math assessment that our teachers have created for the 8th grade students after they've been accepted and done all of that stuff, and continuing to use STAR in terms of like the school-wide data process. We're gonna feel it out for the rest of the year and kind of go from there. I think one of the limitations that we were excited about initially was the SAT and ACT reporting, but it actually isn't very helpful because it only gives you like, we think the average will be around here, and that's not really helpful in terms of how we want to use that information. We're still going to play around with it. We have some ideas. We've been talking about what we like about it, what we don't, and going from there. So we will dive into how we want to move forward this summer. That's just like an update on that. In terms of math specifically, we're lucky that the math department is pretty okay with looking at numbers in various ways. So they're doing their best to use it alongside their classroom assessments. This checkpoint system that we have with the building and thinking classrooms model. Jen is participating in a PD we're doing with department leads and other teachers around visible thinking and metacognition in classrooms and things like that. We are hoping to send the entire math team to a math conference around the same sort of work to continue with the visible thinking work in math classes. And I'll let Jen talk about other things, but I don't know if there's questions about those big ideas.
An example of a visual thinking.
Yeah, I think Jen is the right one for that because she's done a lot of them and has specifics. Actually, Laurel has some really good ideas too, if you want a non-math example. So.
Okay, so I'm Jen Webb. Trey had asked me to give you guys a little bit of a background of where I come from as a teacher. I taught middle school for 18 years and mostly 8th grade math, science, and algebra 1. I would say that my teaching style was pretty traditional up until COVID. And through the COVID time, I started teaching in a self-paced model that had students learning from videos of my instruction. And what I found was that freed me up for all of my class time to be one-on-one with students or in small groups, which was great. But I saw that there wasn't a lot of deep thinking going on. Students were just taking that direct instruction and going with it, and they weren't really thinking about the math they were learning. So a couple months before I started at East Mountain is when I discovered the thinking classroom model. And I knew instantly that was the approach that I had to try when I started at East Mountain. what that looks like, to be just very specific, is every kid is randomly assigned to a vertical whiteboard, and they're assigned in groups of 3. I give them the minimal amount of information that they need to start a problem. And from the strategy that they use or they create to start to solve that simple problem, they use that same strategy and they build onto a more complex problem. And I guide them, or I scaffold these problems so that they start at a very low, simple level, but by the end of the 20 or 30 minutes at the boards, they're working through complex problems. And they're doing that on their own in their groups. But the visible thinking part is I can stand in the middle of the classroom and look around and see exactly what they're working on. I can see which groups are on the right track, which ones are stuck. And so I'm able to intervene immediately or give them hints or encourage them to keep going because I can see exactly what they're thinking. Through this process, I think students really learn that they are the experts. They stop relying on me as the expert math person in the room, and they start relying on each other. You see them or you hear them talking about math in a way that they never would if it was just me standing and lecturing to them and then passively taking notes from me. So I think that's one of the biggest gains for students is that they are meaningfully exploring and learning the math. They're also learning that making mistakes is how they learn. So it really normalizes this idea of you're not going to learn unless you're making mistakes. And so I think that's super important. Another, I think, big difference is how a thinking classroom is graded. It's not a matter of how many assignments, how much homework you do and turn in, because it's set up in a way that students are responsible for deciding what practice they need. And so they can set different goals for themselves. They can set the goal to achieve all of the advanced levels for every skill, and then they know that that's where they need to be practicing. Whereas another student who might struggle a little bit more decides they're happy hitting the intermediate level. So it's not an assigned homework with the same set of practice work for every student. It's very, very diversified and very the students have to be self-aware and they have to be self-motivated. That's part of the challenge, I think, that we as a math department are facing. One of our challenges is getting students to understand that they have to be self-motivated. They've had the experience for many, many years that teachers assign work, they do the work and turn it in. And now we're trying to retrain them and teach them that they are responsible for their learning, that the teacher isn't the one that's responsible, it's them. They're also learning how to collaborate, which can be a struggle to get students to work efficiently together. But I think that these are the skills that beyond the math are really important for students to learn. When you think about things like collaboration and time management and self-reflection, there's definitely a lifelong benefit in those skills. I'm happy to answer any questions about what I've described.
Can I add something?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, thinking classrooms and building thinking classrooms and maths praises just from what I've seen. So I am not a math teacher, I'm a history teacher. But a while back I think I told Jen this, a while back we have kids eat in our classrooms a lot, as we heard from Mike. We don't have spaces and sunflower. Anyway, we have kids in our classrooms a lot eating lunch. And there were some boys that were talking, and these aren't the most studious boys. And they were talking about this, how it went in math today. And this one boy says, "Oh, here, I'll show you like we do in class." And they walked over, these 3 boys, to the board in my room. And this one boy, and they wrote the problem out, right? And then they all sat and talked about it together and made decisions. And I just remember I hadn't seen building thinking classrooms in action yet, but I saw these kids doing this and I just was like, wow, I need to tell Miss Webb that these kids are amazing. But I didn't even realize that what they were doing is like exactly, the strategy that she's been teaching them until later we went and we got to learn from Jen what she does and like what all the math teachers are doing with building thinking classrooms. And I went, oh, that's what those kids were doing. So they've totally like internalized it so much that they are just doing it on their own at lunch in their history teacher classroom. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I wanted to tell you that if I didn't.
That is cool.
I have
I
a
was-
question.
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Brad. Yeah, go for it, Brad. Yeah, I know
I have a question for Jen, especially emphasized by Laurel's comment. Who else can do this teaching? Is the whole math department doing it?
The whole math department is doing it. Yes.
Have you thought about expanding it along the lines Laurel suggests to other topics?
I think there are teachers in other subject areas that have taken definitely aspects of it. I know that there's some English teachers that have started using the random grouping pretty regularly. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of teachers interested in adapting it to their subject area.
Yeah, obviously it's not one for one adaptation, but some elements do seem to be transferable. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think most of the framework is transferable to any subject area. Yeah.
Super. I have another question that may go back to Margie. I'm not sure. And this has to do with the shortcomings that you identified with the STAR rating system and other attempts. Can you elaborate on what the shortcomings are?
I think a lot of it has to do with the way that, and like I think Jen has a specific example too, but the way that the teachers want to use the information that is presented, it's very hard to, it's very time consuming to get the information that you want. And so ideally you get a set of student data and it is nicely laid out and you can manipulate it and you can kind of identify a specific area you want to see and hone in on that. And I think there are platforms out there that exist, but with STAR, like I need to pick a student, go into his profile, go into the test I want to look. It's actually more difficult than it should be to compare a specific skill over the course of the 3 tests that they're going to take. I have to look individually at 3 different reports instead of being able to see like a comparison in an easy way. That I think is a very nice way that teachers would like to look at that. And the way that they roll out the reports, they make it very cumbersome. So teachers aren't like jumping to go mine all that data and look through it all in the way that we would like. I don't know if either of you want to add to that, Jen or Laurel.
Well, I would say specifically what I would like, or one of the things I'd like to see very easily from the data is, here is a class of students that are taking Algebra 1 right now. What is their growth in the algebraic concepts over the year? Where the test results just give us a raw score. So they may move from a 1310 to a 1357, but I have no idea what that means in terms of growth with algebra content. Whereas another teacher might want to see growth in geometry content because that's the class that they're in. Again, the score doesn't break that down into anything specific that's usable for us.
I think that's one of the struggles,
I think I've heard 2 issues. One is that the data does not give you subsets or specific skill weaknesses or strengths. And at that level especially, it does not allow you to trend the data without a great deal of labor on your part. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right.
It strikes me that there are enough data systems around attached to different short cycle assessments available that there's got to be something better on the market. Not true?
I believe that.
Brad, can you hear me? Brad,
Yes,
can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you.
Math specifically in terms of assessments is a real struggle because, so for example, the STAR test for reading is the same skill no matter if you're doing a reading test on an SAT or a reading test through STAR. And so you know what you're looking at. The issue with like an SAT for math is that it's doing wildly different content areas in math, like your algebra, your geometry, your trig. And none of these like short cycle assessments are well aligned to how high schools teach math as well as how the SAT assesses math skills. And so there are some things we are going to look at, like IXL is something we want to look into, but it's a tall order. And we've interviewed a lot of schools to figure out what is the thing, and it's a struggle everywhere. I like that we're doing the work and having the conversation, trying to find the right thing, but you'd be surprised how much shortcomings there is in terms of math specific assessment.
Well, I'm
That's
chagrined to hear that, and it's really a shame. Have you looked out of state, Trey? At states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, for what they're using?
Where Margie comes from.
And I think similarly, we had the same issues, right? It's tough because what the state wants and what the tests that are available to us, they're not going to be aligned unless we use like an in-house SAT cycle, which I don't think actually supports student learning in the way that we hope to have our students engage with what we're presenting in our classes. Because it's not about like, can they take this test? It's about like, can they learn these skills? Can they do the thinking when presented with any type of problem? They can at least know what questions to ask to try to figure it out, whether or not they get the right answer. If it's on a totally different level than they've ever engaged with, we still want them to engage, right? And I think that part is hard. And I think with the math specifically, we don't teach them. They learn algebra 1 and then they learn geometry, and it's hard to get the data the way that we want it unless we're going to spend the time and money to create all that, which will take us a long time to do, right? And so I think we are interested in learning what else is out there and we want to see. And I think something we learned, right, we're learning right now is like, it's hard to get information to this back end part that we're actually going to be using. They'll show us the exams, they'll show us the student interface, they'll show us what we need to do, but then getting the information on what we can do on the back end is a lot more difficult. And so I think talking to more people, learning different things, exploring different things makes sense. So maybe the literacy piece sticks with STAR and the math thing does something else. That's not ideal, but if we have to move in that direction, we will.
I can appreciate your frustration, especially with math being a high leverage skill for adult futures, and the highly instructional individual power of understanding which students are weak in what skills. I would wonder if, just amazed that there's not some instrument that does that for you with data manipulation backup. I'm wondering if the OECD or Finland might have answers, but I know that's stretching a little far.
You know, I think if we had a team of people specifically assigned to deal with this data problem, it would be different, but that's like 5 other people that we don't have. So
how about PED? Could you stick PED on this problem?
can you ask them for us and let us know what they say?
Let us know what their answer was.
Let us know something. So that kind of circles around. This is more of a curiosity question. I think it's a powerful pedagogical model, right? What I think is an interesting, and this is what we've been talking about, is that there's 2 entities, right? You have a traditional standardized test that's built on a traditional model of pedagogy, and we've introduced sort of a forward-thinking model of pedagogy. And so the question I always ask is, does the pedagogical practice that we've now implemented transfer over to the way the PSAT and SAT actually captures or measures what it intends to? And I always find that that's just such a fascinating chicken before the egg discussion where we're implementing this really high level thinking, right? Pedagogical model, which is what we want. We don't want knowledge. We don't want rote memorization. We want applicability. We want metacognition, right? So we want to plug all those things in. But then when it spits it out on the other side of the computer, the question I always have is how do we bridge that between this new practice, which is awesome, and then also at the same time assure that we have some exports coming out that are looking decent, right?
If I may offer a thought, I don't have personal experience with it, but from the descriptions I've heard and the sample instruments I've seen, the OECD PISA test, now labeled something different, does exactly what you're talking about, Glenn. The problem, of course, is the data comes back as a whole school number, and it's not useful for feedback.
So I
Jen,
did.
Oh, go ahead, Jen. Sorry, and then when Jen completes speaking, Janae, we'll have you take the floor. Okay, thanks. Go for it, Jen.
So I did do some digging into the PSAT scores from last year, so the freshmen last year, and I took all of the students that were in my class for at least a semester and averaged their growth between their September test and their March test, I think were the dates. And on average, students went up 36 points. That's something I don't really know what that means until I looked into what's the average growth, and the average growth from one year to the next year is 25 to 30 points. So I feel like from September to March, increasing 36 points is definitely on the average or above average.
Oh, that's statistically significant.
I think so.
Thanks, Jen. Janae, did you have a question?
I did have a question. First, I want to say thanks, Ms. Webb, because I love the thinking classroom model. I think it's fabulous. But you stated that the challenge is the kids who aren't motivated, right? The students who aren't motivated. What is the department doing at this point for those students?
So I do a lot to kind of retrain students to be responsible for their own learning. We do a lot of self-reflections, whether it's just, a quick reflection on how they collaborated that day, or I have a rubric for work ethic, and have them rate the statements on, how much effort have they been putting into their work. So lots of reflection, lots of discussions about what best practices are. And then seeing the correlation. So I had a student she was hanging in my room at lunch, and she was working on her math. And she told me she realized that she was struggling with something. So she just went and did a bunch of problems. And then on the next assessment, she did great. And it was almost like she was surprised, like that doing practice paid off. So it's just getting students to that point to seeing that, yes, this actually is a thing that works out.
And to understand their own learning style, right? That's good.
Yeah, and just understanding that the effort pays off. I mean, I'm having this struggle with my own son right now, trying to convince him that he needs to do the practice work, even though it's not graded, kind of thing. But,
good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to kind of start to bring it to a close, I would say we've just been really excited with the level of collaboration on the math department team. It's an entirely different school structure that we're dealing with this year than we were even 3 years ago. Those who were at the conference at the time you may have seen Jen was there. I asked her to please put together a presentation, and she had the most attended presentation of the entire conference. So I think there was close to 40 people in her session, and she had them up moving around the room, and there was joy in the room. And just seeing like movement and joy is not something typically associated with math. And it is a game changer. And I think what we are doing in math is a game changer, not just for us, but the whole state. And so I want to continue to champion this and get this as a model out there. Like, she was able to make connections at other schools and build a larger network as well. So I think there's a lot of potential here, not just for improving outcomes for our students, but for, we always say we want to be a model school, and I think this is a way to do that, is to kind of champion the success we're seeing here. So really excited at everything the math department has done. I think we're really lucky to have Jen leadership on this. We are excited. Melanie's in the room too. We're really excited to have someone like Melanie, who's been part of both our math department and our science department. Melanie comes from 18 years experience of teaching science at the college level, and now was teaching math for us in the fall as well. And so it's been a super important part of that process. And so I think we have a really good team, and it's really exciting to see the moves we're making. And we'll continue to report on assessments and tools, Brad, and finding better things. And I think it's an exciting place to be, that we adopted something and we want to find even something better. So that's cool. I'm done. Let's turn it over to
Great. Yeah, so we're good there. Yeah, that was a lot. We went round and round. Great conversation. Thanks, everyone. Laurel, would you like to take the floor now?
Yes, I will take the air. Miss Schrader, Miss Stephanie's back from her maternity leave, and we've missed her a lot. I've missed her a lot, and it was awesome. First governing council meeting, I send out who's got input, and Stephanie has saved the day with so many awesome updates about senior seminar in particular. She wanted me to share with you about what senior seminar is and what the seniors are doing there and why. So Mr. James and Ms. Schrader teach a class called Senior Seminar, which is a senior capstone experience, if you haven't heard of it yet. And they're preparing in this course to give a final capstone presentation to an assembled and invited group of important teachers, important mentors, friends, family members, just the community that's helped raise this kid. And they get to assemble these people and essentially give this talk about who they've been and where they're going. And they're really beautiful, amazing experiences. If you've never been to one, let us know. So it's just like they try to build the classes like a rite of passage, because it's such an important time and transition to adulthood. And so East Mountain High School, through this experience, is really trying to make that transition intentional and meaningful. So some of the specific activities that they do to prepare themselves for this talk that they give is they do a lot of like delving into their strengths. And so they do some personality work and tests, and then build that into their sort of academic graduate profile, and think about how their traits as people can complement their strengths as students and all the knowledge and thinking that they've done. So that's pretty cool. They do an assignment called the User's Manual, where they sort of talk about themselves as a metaphor and what they need to function best. And so they do things like their safety protocols and their do's and their don'ts. And it's collaborative. They interview one another about their strengths. And then I've had students do this before they go to teachers they feel who know them, and they have an assignment to interview us about who they have become. And, they'll ask, when I was a freshman, Miss Legate, what was I like and how have I changed? So we just get to have these really beautiful conversations with kids that I don't think you get to have at other schools. So I know as a teacher, I appreciate this senior capstone experience. Does anybody have any questions about that?
How do you get invited?
Well, let's talk, Brad, and I'll find some kiddos that would be okay with maybe having a guest. So I'm sure we have those out there who will say more the merrier.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. The other thing Stephanie wanted to share with you was what's going on in her sophomore honors history class. So they've been studying golden ages. She has a thematic unit called Golden Ages, which is about the rise and fall of empire. And so she has a lot of kind of fun interactive assignments. Like I think one of the assessments for their Golden Age exploration is they create a travel brochure, like as if you're going to this Golden Age. What would the civilization be? And then soon after, she does sort of a juxtaposing unit. I'm not quite sure what she means by juxtaposing there, but which is a unit on colonialism. So that's world history. So it'll be colonialism, all different kinds and times and places, I imagine. Does anybody have any questions specifically about sophomore history lately? Or any history, social studies? I could even talk about English probably. Okay, cool. The last thing I wanted to share, just because I think it goes really well with thinking about building thinking classrooms and all that Jen and Margie and Trey were sharing with us, just this idea of building thinking anything seems to be big right now. Margie has us working in grade level groups, which is different from what we've been doing. And often, you have your department groups and then you have this group. Anyway, we have many different configurations of groups, which is awesome because you get to work with different people on different issues, but all of these different groups overlap. So we have specifically a freshman teacher and freshman EA PD time set aside, where we think about, as freshman teachers, patterns that we're seeing that are good or bad, or things that we all agree we need to work on. And so one of the things, Jen is a freshman teacher, so we work together a lot on this kind of thing. And so we were talking about how organizational systems need to be more visible to kids. So freshman kids in particular, which is why it's good to have these sort of niche groups, to think about this particular freshman problem. So we were noticing that when you are a middle school teacher, which many of us have been, Jen included, myself included, you just kind of take for granted that you are going to have to really handhold the kids with organization, because they're used to being in an elementary school room where there's one teacher who centralizes all the authority in this one place, and here are our procedures for this one class, and she's probably they probably walking around making sure that you're on the right page and you've got your work turned in and blah, blah, blah. When kids get to middle school, I think we're trying to we have middle school before high school because we're trying to maybe like wean them off those supports. And now you have multiple teachers and you have to try to executive function, which is something I lack even as an adult. Think about everything, all the different due dates, and I have this project that started on Monday and it's going to be due Friday, and then I have another class with a project over 2 weeks, and right, like you can just see kids really trying to learn how to do this. And when they get to ninth grade, big surprise, they're still not awesome at it. And so we've been working as a freshman team on something that I'm going to just go ahead and call making organization visible. And we had a really good creative use. We had this long advocacy where the freshmen didn't really have much to do. And we weren't going to be there as teachers because we were with other groups working on discovery. But we decided to make a plan with the EAs and other staff that were going to be there with the students, that we planned ahead, all of us freshman teachers and EAs, and we created like a Google form where we showed our organizational systems as teachers. And we even like took pictures of like, here's how Miss Legate organizes, here's how Coach Ord, and we did like time and space. So we were showing them like, here's my calendar. I use a calendar to know when I need to have things done. And I don't, and some teachers were like, everything's digital. Here's my Google, right? But the idea was getting kids to think, what is your way, right? Like, who are you? Do you want to use your phone? Do you want to use pen and paper? Do you have some crazy way you use, I don't know, Snapchat? You would be surprised how kids organize themselves these days. But just the message being, you have to have a way, right? Like, we can no longer be the ones who are always giving you the tools. Like, we need to wean you off these supports because you have to become an adult who can organize all of this information. So anyway, we're just trying to use time creatively and focus on things that we all see are a problem. And I've rambled a bit, but any questions?
I just want to add that as somebody who facilitates those longer ninth grade advocacies, this one was my favorite one because it was so fun to learn about all the different teachers and their organizational styles. And I think the ninth grade level team is the biggest. There's like 10 people on it. And the fact that they got 10 people to create like one plan is impressive in itself. And so bravo to all of you.
Questions for Laurel? Anybody?
Oh, thank you, Laurel. That was interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurel.
Thanks, Laurel. Thank you.
Melanie, did you have anything to share this evening since you're here?
Ask her about what she's wearing.
Yeah.
Oh,
we can't
hear you.
You got to turn on your sound. We can't hear you.
Let's call her out.
It's pajama day.
Oh, pajama day. Yes, I see. I did see a lot of pajamas today. And then I'm sitting there watching all the pajamas go by, and I'm like, what's Dave Roberts going to say? I'm calling Dave. I'm going to be like, hey, come on, you know how we feel about this. And we joke back and forth. We had a pajama day the other day. It was about everybody's excited for the pajamas. That's good.
Everyone's favorite day.
Yeah. I don't know, Melanie, I don't know if we can hear you or not. So, yeah. Sorry, we put you on the spot and everything, and then technology just didn't allow it to come through. It's all right. We'll keep clicking on it, Melanie, and we'll move on. But if you figure it out, you can jump in. Yes. Very good. Well, thank you for the detailed reports, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your time and being here. Thanks, Melanie. We see your chat there. Thank you. Great. Well, that takes us forward on the agenda to the parking lot items for future GC meetings. Does anybody have any parking lot items? Okay. Hearing none. It takes us to the Governing Council Board Member Comment section of the agenda.
Glenn, I'd like to suggest if we're about to take up the executive director assessment issue, or are we at that point in the agenda?
If this is the right place to discuss that, yes, this would be the ideal time. If we were going to speak on the topic of the executive director evaluation tool, since it's still a little bit under construction and there's still some debate and discussion about it, it would probably be best if we moved into a closed session, but that is also the will of the council. So I'll open that for the floor for consideration.
If this is the right time for it in the sequence of this meeting, I would like to move that we go closed.
Very good. So there's a motion on the floor to close the meeting so that we can discuss the executive director evaluation tool. Is there a second?
When does it, oh, I'll second
Great. Excellent. So we would vote. Yeah. So all those in favor to move into a closed session, we would need a thumbs up or a raised hand. So, right. Yeah. Okay. So that's unanimous. That's great. Before we move into a closed session, I do need to state for the record that there are no action items that we exercise inside closed sessions, and there are no votes that occur inside closed sessions. So the only thing that we do is discuss, in this case, the evaluation, the executive director's evaluation tool, and we do so because it's a personnel matter, which is why we're moving into a closed session. So I just wanted that to be on the record. So at this point in time, we can move into the closed session. For those of you that want to remain, I will note this quickly. I don't have a chair's report. And so really, after we exit the closed session, we'll come back into the open meeting per Open Meetings Act rules. And then we will finish up with the next meeting announcement, and then we'll adjourn. So in other words, if you don't want to hang around, there's not much else that'll probably be of interest. That's all I have to say. Yes, you're free to go. So,
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, thank you. With that said, we'll officially move into closed session. For those of you that are not going to attend and hang out for the adjournment, it's been wonderful to have you here. And again, thanks for your dedication to the school. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, I'm gonna start with the worst place.
It's okay. It's really not a rush. It's
Moving
no,
slowly.
don't. When we know that you're still like recovering
I'm still in the
Yeah.
boot.
in multiple ways. You're sick and you're
I
injured.
broke my heel bone. The inside of it. Yeah. I like fell and turned, and the physics of it just didn't work out. Yeah. Me too. It's
My
okay.
son's in one of those right now.
There's like 8 of us on campus.
Yeah.
It's great. Most of them are children. So,
And.
all right.
got
Bye,
a-
everyone. Oh, my
her
computer.
eye, she went and got an X-ray, but she was fine.
Needs some help.
So for 4 weeks, he was doing, that's running,
So from where?
hiking, and it was progressively getting worse. Long story short, they went back and did another MRI. They found that her hip was totally shattered,
No, goodness.
and her head of her femur and her acetabulum, it had completely eroded it away.
Oh.
They had to do a total. Well, and she walked on it for over a month. They told her it wasn't wrong.
When my mom broke her hip, she lived in upstate New York. It was like snow all over the ground, big piles of snow. She crawled about 50 yards. She was like 86 at the time. Back to the house with a broken hip.
Oh my.
Well, she would have frozen.
Well, I know it's like sheer survival. I think.
And that's amazing what people can do.
Indeed. Okay, gang. So we're officially in the closed meeting. To Janae and Brad, can you hear me? Okay, still. I just want to make sure I don't lose
Yes.
you.
Yes. I'm still good.